Hey, you called me, I came. Did you think I wouldn't come?
I tried now.
Declan Marsh copied a flirty text his best friend sent as a joke. His thumb moved too fast. The message landed in the wrong thread, sent straight to his boss, Senna Herrera, head of engineering. Delivered. Read. He sat frozen in his Jamaica Plain apartment, waiting for the end of his career. But instead of anger, her reply was 5 words that changed everything. "I'm coming to your place now." She knocked on his door 20 minutes later, and what she said was the last thing he expected. What would you have done? If you enjoy stories like this, hit like and subscribe. Where are you watching from? On a freezing February night in Boston, with wind cutting down Center Street hard enough to rattle the windows of his small Jamaica Plain apartment, Declan Marsh was sitting on his worn-out couch, doing what he always did after work. Nothing brave. His laptop glowed on the coffee table, tuned to an old episode of The Twilight Zone he had already seen 3 times. The one where the man breaks his glasses after the world ends. And every time Declan watched it, he thought the same thing. That guy finally had time and still lost. A half-finished cup of black coffee from Sorella's sat cold on the armrest beside him. He had picked it up on the way home like he did every evening. Large black, no sugar, $2.60. Same order so familiar, the girl at the register started pouring before he even spoke. His phone buzzed. Nico again. His best friend since freshman year at UMass Amherst. Loud, reckless, currently living in Chicago, and fully convinced that Declan was one bold decision away from an actual life. They had been texting for the past hour, bouncing between a stubborn bug Declan could not fix at work, and the subject Nico always circled back to. Any women in your life? Or are you still married to your IDE? Declan typed back the same deflection he always used. I'm good, man. Just busy. But Nico never let it go that easy. You said there was someone. The new boss. What happened with that? Declan stared at the screen. What happened was nothing, because nothing was what he was good at. Her name was Senna Herrera. She was 39, divorced, sharp in a way that made you pay attention even when she was not talking. She had transferred from the company's San Francisco office 6 months ago to lead the engineering department in Boston. And from her first morning, she carried herself like someone who had already survived the worst a career could throw at her and decided to keep walking anyway. She wore her dark hair pulled back most days, spoke in meetings without raising her voice, and had a habit of standing behind people's desks while reviewing their work, close enough that Declan could smell her perfume. Something warm, like cedar and vanilla. And every single time it happened, his mind went blank. He had never told her. He had barely told himself. The only person who knew was Nico, and that was only because one night after 2 beers at a bar in Allston, Declan let it slip. She's my boss. She's 9 years older than me. She has a son. It's not happening. Nico had laughed so hard he almost knocked over his glass. That's not a reason. That's a list of excuses. Since then, Nico brought her up at least once a week. Tonight was no different. Just tell me what you'd say to her if nothing mattered, Nico texted. If there were no job, no rules, no consequences. Declan typed and deleted 4 different answers before settling on the truth. I wouldn't even know where to start. That was when Nico sent it. A message, written like a dare, bold, honest, the kind of thing Declan would never say out loud in 1,000 years. You're truly captivating. I know this might cross a line, but I'd regret not saying it. Hope you're not bothered. Declan read it twice. His chest tightened because the worst part was that it sounded exactly like something he had been holding inside for months. Copy that and send it to her, Nico wrote. I dare you. Declan laughed quietly and copied the message, planning to paste it back into their chat with a sarcastic reply. But his thumb moved too fast. He tapped the wrong thread. The message sent, not to Nico, but to Sena Herrera, his boss, the woman he had spent 6 months silently admiring from across a conference table. Delivered. Then the 2 small check marks that meant she had seen it. Declan's heart slammed against his ribs so hard he felt dizzy. Heat rushed up his neck. He stood up and knocked his knee against the coffee table. His hands went slick with sweat. He tried to type something, an apology, an explanation, anything, but every sentence he wrote looked worse than the last. Then her reply came through. 5 words on his iPhone 14 screen that made the floor disappear beneath him. "I'm coming to your place now." He stopped breathing. His address was in the company directory. She could find it in seconds. He stared at the message until his eyes burned. 20 minutes later, a knock came at his door. Sharp, certain, the kind of knock that already knows you are standing on the other side. Declan opened it with his hand shaking against the lock. Sena stood in the dim hallway light, holding her phone in one hand and a dark coat folded over her arm. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders, not in the tight ponytail she wore at work. The cold had left a faint pink on her cheeks. She did not look angry. That made it worse. "Ben," she said, then caught herself and almost smiled. "Declan, let me in." He stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her eyes passing over his small apartment without a word. The worn couch, the cheap lamp from Target, the laptop still glowing on the coffee table, the stack of takeout boxes near the kitchen. He closed the door behind her, and the click sounded final. He started talking too fast. "I'm so sorry. That text wasn't meant for you. I was talking to my friend Nico, and I sent it to the wrong person. I swear I wasn't trying to be weird." She held up one hand gently. "Stop." Her voice was firm, but not harsh. "I read the message, Declan. We both know what it said. Let's not pretend it didn't happen." She set her coat over the back of his chair and turned to face him. "You called me captivating," she said quietly. "You said you'd regret not saying it." His throat tightened. "Because you're my boss," he admitted. "Because I need this job. Because I didn't want to make you uncomfortable." She held his gaze for a long moment, and the silence between them felt alive, like something waiting to be named. "I didn't come here to yell," she said softly. "Then why are you here?" he asked. Something shifted in her face, something vulnerable breaking through the calm she wore like armor every day at work. "Because I couldn't sit in my apartment and pretend I didn't feel something too." Declan felt his heart stop and restart in the same second. She sat on the edge of his couch, and for the next hour they talked like 2 people who had been holding their breath for months and finally let go. She told him about her divorce, how it happened at her last company, how she had married a colleague, and when it fell apart, the whole office picked sides. She told him about her son, Ethan, 9 years old, living with his father in Sacramento, and how some nights she sat in her apartment in the back bay and called him just to hear him talk about Minecraft before bed. "I promised myself I would never mix work and personal life again," she said, "and I meant it." Declan sat in the chair across from her and told her the truth he had never said to anyone except Nico. "I've wanted you since your first week. You stood behind my chair and asked about my code. And you were so close, I could feel your breath near my ear. I forgot every word I knew." She looked at him like she had not expected that kind of honesty from someone so quiet. Before she left, she straightened up and looked him in the eyes with the same steady confidence she used in boardrooms, except this time there was something raw underneath it. If this is just a rush from a risky text, we end it here, she said. We go back to normal tomorrow and pretend none of this happened. Declan's stomach dropped at the idea of going back to normal. And if it's not just a rush? He asked. Then we don't do this halfway, she replied. No flirting at work. No texting during office hours unless it's about work. If we meet, it's outside the office. And if at any point this threatens either of our jobs, we deal with it like adults. He nodded slowly, even though his head was spinning. I can do that. She studied his face. You're still terrified. I am, he admitted, but not of you. I'm scared of losing control. She stepped toward the door, and he followed. When he opened it, the hallway felt colder than before. She paused at the threshold, turned back, and said quietly, I feel something too. Then she walked down the hallway without looking back, her footsteps fading against the old wooden floor. Declan stood there with his door half open, the cold air pressing against his face, his phone still warm in his pocket. He knew, with a certainty that sat heavy in his chest, that his safe, small, predictable life had just ended. The next evening, at exactly 4:47, Declan's phone buzzed on his desk. A single message from Senna. No greeting, no context, just an address in Cambridge and a time. 6:15. He stared at it for a full minute, then closed his laptop, told his team he had an appointment, and walked out of the building on Congress Street, trying to look like a man who was not about to do the most terrifying thing he had ever done. He took the red line from Downtown Crossing, standing in the crowded car with his hand on the overhead rail, watching the tunnel lights blur past the window. He got off at Kendall and walked 6 blocks toward the river until he found the place, a small wine bar tucked between a bookstore and a law office, with soft lighting and dark wood tables and the kind of quiet that felt intentional. He picked a table near the back, facing the door, ordered a glass of something red he did not even read the name of, and waited. At exactly 6:15, Senna walked in. Her hair was down around her shoulders, and she was wearing a black sweater and jeans. No blazer, no heels, nothing that looked like the woman who ran engineering meetings with 30 people watching her every word. She spotted him, and something in her face softened. Not a smile exactly, but a kind of relief, like she had been holding something tight all day and was finally letting go. She sat across from him and said, "Hi." He said, "Hi," and his voice came out quieter than he wanted. For a while, they just looked at each other, the kind of silence that would have been unbearable anywhere else, but here felt honest. Then she leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. "I want to do this the right way," she said. "If there is a right way." He nodded. "Me too." She studied his face like she was looking for doubt. "Last night wasn't easy for me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I knocked on your door. I almost drove home twice." Declan blinked. He had not imagined her being nervous. She always seemed so sure of everything, the kind of person who made hard decisions look like simple math. "I didn't sleep last night," he admitted. "Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing you say you felt something too. And then I'd convince myself I imagined it." She gave a small, tired laugh. "You didn't imagine it." Then she told him the full story, the one she had only touched on the night before. After her divorce 3 years ago at her previous company, rumors spread through the office like a fire no one tried to put out. People she thought were friends started avoiding her. Her ex-husband, who also worked there, got invited to dinners she was quietly removed from. She spent a year fighting to keep her reputation while co-parenting a 6-year-old across 2 apartments in the same city. "I swore I would never mix work and personal life again," she said. "I meant it." Declan sat with that for a moment, turning his glass slowly on the table. "So, "Why are you here?" he asked, not challenging, just honest. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "Because you don't chase me," she said. "You don't flirt in meetings. You don't try to impress me with jokes, or show up at my office with coffee hoping I'll notice. You just show up and do good work. And when you look at me, it doesn't feel like you want something from me. It feels like you actually see me." His chest tightened. "I do see you," he said quietly. "Not just the title." She held his gaze. "There's chemistry. You feel it. I feel it. Pretending we don't would be lying." The word chemistry made his pulse jump because it made everything real in a way that both scared him and woke something up inside him that had been dormant for years. "I've wanted to kiss you," he admitted before he could stop himself. Her eyebrows lifted. "Since when?" "Since the first time you stood behind my chair and asked about my code. You leaned close, and I forgot what I was saying. I forgot what language I was writing in." A slow smile crossed her lips. "And you never said anything. Because I respect you, and because I didn't want to be the guy who ruins everything." Her expression softened. "Reckless people ruin things, Declan. Careless people ruin things. You're not careless." They left the wine bar without finishing their drinks and stepped into the cold night air. The Charles River was a few blocks away, and they walked toward it without discussing it, like their feet had agreed on something their mouths had not. The sidewalk was damp from earlier rain, and the city lights reflected off the pavement in long, broken streaks. When they reached a quieter stretch near the water, she stopped. "If this ends badly," she said, turning to face him, "it will hurt more than just us. I have a son, Ethan. He's 9. I don't bring people into his life unless I believe they're staying." The weight of that hit him harder than anything she had said all night. "I'm not playing around," he said. "I don't do casual well. If I'm in, I'm in." She searched his face like she was looking for cracks. "You're shaking," she said gently. "I've never done something this risky," he admitted. "My whole life is built on safe choices." She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth from her body, even through the February cold. "Maybe safe isn't the same as happy," she said. The distance between them shrank to nothing. Her hand lifted and rested against his chest, right over his heart. "You're going to have to stop thinking so much," she whispered. Then she kissed him, slow, careful, honest, like they were both testing something fragile. The lights of the Longfellow Bridge glowed behind them, reflected in the dark water. 2 days later, reality arrived. Declan was at his desk reviewing a pull request when a calendar notification appeared on his screen. Mandatory meeting with HR, 2:00 p.m. His hands went cold. He clicked it, and his stomach dropped when he saw the second name on the invite. Senna Herrera. Had someone seen them? Had Mark from the engineering team, who kept glancing between them during yesterday's meeting, said something? He looked down the hall toward Senna's glass-walled office. She was on a call, calm as always, but when she walked past his desk a few minutes later, she said in a voice so quiet only he could hear, "Don't panic. I scheduled it." He stared at her. At exactly 2 hours, they sat across from Karen in HR, a woman with reading glasses and a thin folder who smiled politely and said she would be direct. "A concern has been raised about possible blurred boundaries within the engineering department. Is there a personal relationship that could create a reporting conflict?" Senna did not hesitate. "Yes," she said, "there is." Declan confirmed it, his voice steadier than he expected. Karen explained company policy. Relationships within a reporting line had to be disclosed and resolved. Senna had already mapped the plan. Declan would transfer to the Cambridge platform team. Same level, same pay. Clean reporting line. I want it documented that there will be no retaliation and no impact to his performance reviews, Senna added. Declan looked at her, sitting perfectly still, trusting him to choose freely. He said yes. The next 2 weeks were strange. Some people at the office acted normal. Others looked at Declan like he had suddenly become interesting or dangerous, or both. He heard his name once in the break room on the 4th floor, and the voices stopped the second he walked in. He kept his head down. Madison, no, Senna, he corrected himself. She had a first name now that belonged to him too. She stayed steady through all of it. Strong, professional, untouchable at work. On his last day at the Boston office, he packed his desk into a single cardboard box. 6 years of his life fit into something he could carry with one arm. His old coffee mug. A framed photo of him and Nico at graduation. A sticky note from his first week that said, "You'll figure it out," in his own handwriting, which he had stuck to his monitor and never taken down. He carried the box to his car, a gray 2019 Honda Civic parked in the garage beneath the building, and sat there in the driver's seat. He did not start the engine. He just sat. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Senna. 2 words. "Proud of you." He stared at those words for 10 minutes, his hands resting on the steering wheel, the quiet of the parking garage pressing in around him. Something he had not felt in years settled into his chest. Not excitement, not fear, but the strange, unfamiliar sensation that his life was getting bigger instead of smaller. Weeks turned into months, and what Declan and Senna built together was not dramatic or loud. It was Sunday mornings walking along the esplanade when the joggers thinned out and the Charles River turned silver under a pale sky, her hand finding his inside his coat pocket, because she said his fingers were always cold, and someone had to fix that. It was late dinners at her apartment in Beacon Hill, a 3rd-floor walk-up on Pinckney Street with tall windows, and a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people, where she cooked arroz con pollo from her mother's recipe, the one she learned growing up in El Paso, and told him stories about crossing the border to Juarez on weekends to visit her grandmother, about the smell of flour tortillas at 5 in the morning, about how her mother used to say that love was not a feeling, but a decision you made every single day. It was Friday nights on his couch in Jamaica Plain watching old movies on his laptop, her legs tucked under a blanket he bought just because she always complained his apartment was freezing, and she would fall asleep halfway through every time, her head against his shoulder, and he would just sit there watching her breathe, amazed that someone this strong had chosen to be soft with him. He never moved when she slept. He barely even shifted. Nico told him once over the phone that he sounded different, and Declan asked what he meant. "You sound like someone who actually wants to wake up tomorrow," Nico said. Declan did not argue. The Cambridge office was quieter than Boston, smaller, with no whispers following him down the hallway. His new manager, a guy named Torres, who had been with the company for 11 years, treated him like a developer, not a roomer. Declan wrote code, reviewed pull requests, joined stand-ups at 9:15 every morning, and for the first time in months, his work felt clean again, not tangled up with the fear of someone finding out or the weight of pretending he did not care. He and Senna kept their boundaries. At work, they were strangers. No texts during office hours unless it was professional. No lunches together. No showing up at each other's buildings. It was harder than he expected, not because of temptation, but because of absence, the strange ache of being in the same city as someone you love and choosing distance for the sake of something bigger. But every evening, His phone would buzz after 6 o'clock, and it was always her. Sometimes it was a question about dinner. Sometimes it was a photo of something she saw on her walk home. A dog wearing a sweater on Charles Street, or a sunset over the harbor from her office window. Once it was just a single line. "Long day. Can I come over?" He always said yes. He never hesitated, not once, because saying yes to her had become the easiest decision he made in any given day, and that still surprised him. Then one night, in late April, she came over looking more exhausted than he had ever seen her. She did not text first. She just knocked. When he opened the door, she walked past him without saying hello, kicked off her shoes by the couch, and sat down like her body had been waiting all day for permission to stop. He sat beside her and waited. He had learned that about her, that sometimes she needed 3 minutes of silence before the words came. And if you tried to rush her, she would close up like a door. Finally, she spoke. "All day I'm Senna the boss," she said softly, staring at the wall. "I make decisions. I manage people. I sit in meetings where men twice my age question my judgment, and I smile and I prove them wrong, and I do it again the next day. I just want to be Senna, the person, for a while." He did not say anything. He just took her hand. She looked down at their fingers, and something in her face shifted, like a wall she had been holding up all day, finally cracked. "Ethan is visiting next month," she whispered. The name landed heavy in the quiet room. "His dad is letting him come for a week during spring break." She paused. "I want you to meet him." Declan felt fear rise in his chest, like an old reflex, automatic, instant, the same feeling he had the night she first knocked on his door. "Not to replace anyone," she added quickly, "just because you matter to me, and he matters to me, and I'm tired of keeping the things I love in separate rooms." He said yes, but the weeks leading up to it were harder than he expected. He thought about it during every stand-up meeting, every grocery run, every night he lay awake staring at the ceiling of his Jamaica Plain apartment. Meeting her son meant this was real, in a way that could not be undone. There was no undo button for a child's memory. No clean exit that did not leave marks. Nico called him the night before Ethan's flight landed at Logan. "You're overthinking this," Nico said. "He's 9. Talk to him about video games, and you'll be fine." "What if he hates me?" Declan asked. "What if he looks at me and thinks I'm trying to take his mom away?" Nico was quiet for a second. "Then you show him you're not. Not with words. You just show up and you're decent, and you let the kid decide." The next morning, Declan drove his gray 2019 Civic to Senna's apartment. She opened the door, and behind her stood a boy, smaller than Declan had imagined, curly-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing a Red Sox t-shirt that was slightly too big for him and holding an iPad with a cracked screen protector. "Ethan," Senna said gently, "this is Declan. He's my friend." The boy looked up at him with the kind of honest assessment only children are capable of. No filter, no politeness, just raw evaluation. "So you build stuff on computers?" Ethan asked. "I do," Declan said. "Do you like games?" Ethan's eyes lit up just enough to give Declan hope. They sat at Senna's kitchen table and talked about Minecraft, about robots, about why his iPad froze sometimes. Declan asked to see it and showed him a trick, clearing the background apps and restarting it in a way that made the screen respond twice as fast. Ethan looked at him like he had just done something impossible. "My dad doesn't know how to do that," he said, not as a comparison, just as a fact, the way kids state things without understanding the weight they carry. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, and Declan let Ethan lead. They walked to the park on the common, got ice cream at JP Lick's even though it was barely warm enough for it, and Ethan talked nonstop about a Lego set he was building, and a kid at school named Marcus, who cheated at kickball. Declan listened to every word, not because he was trying to impress Senna, not because he was performing, but because the kid was funny and curious and reminded him of himself at that age, quiet underneath the chatter, watching everything, deciding who was safe. That night, after Ethan fell asleep in Senna's guest room with his iPad still glowing beside him, Senna stood in her kitchen with tears running quietly down her face. "He likes you," she whispered. "I like him too," Declan said. She stepped closer and pressed her forehead against his, just like she had by the river months ago, and whispered, "This started with a mistake, but it doesn't feel like one anymore." Later that evening, back in his Jamaica Plain apartment, Declan sat on the same worn-out couch where everything had started. The same laptop, the same cheap lamp, the same exposed brick walls. But nothing felt the same. He picked up his phone, and this time his thumb was steady. No panic, no accident, no racing heartbeat. He typed the words carefully, deliberately, the same words that had once been sent by mistake and nearly destroyed him. "You're captivating. I meant it then. I mean it now." Her reply came almost instantly, the same 5 words that had terrified him on that freezing February night. "I'm coming to your place now." But this time, he smiled. When the knock came at his door 20 minutes later, it was not sharp and terrifying like the first time. It was familiar, warm, expected. The knock of someone who knew she was welcome. He opened the door, and Senna stood there, smiling, her hair down around her shoulders, wearing the same black sweater she had worn at the wine bar in Cambridge all those months ago. Not his boss, not a risk, not a mistake he had to survive. Just the woman who chose him and the life he was brave enough to choose back. She stepped inside, and he closed the door behind her. And the click did not sound final this time. It sounded like the beginning of something. For the first time, Declan Marsh did not feel like he was about to lose everything. He felt like he was finally building something worth keeping. What did you think of Declan's decision to risk 6 years of stability for someone he never planned to fall for? And what about Senna, showing up at his door that night instead of pretending she felt nothing? Leave your opinion in the comments. On a scale of 0 to 10, what rating would you give this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one.